Yeah.
Thank you for all of your talks. I really related the most to you all talking about like when the printer fails or the slump or like the glitches and stuff like that. I was wondering if you guys would like to talk more about that, because I don't know. I like Raina also, when I started seeing like images of 3D printed things and they just look so angular and like masculine, it was like like I don't know, but watching you do your residency and like seeing the way that you play with it and play with that glitch and the way it doesn't, the dysfunction of it, it's like kind of more interesting in a way. And so yeah, I was just wondering if you would like to, any of you would like to talk more about that dysfunction within this like super new technology.
I think maybe I can answer the question a little bit, because some of my work, which is not in the show, some of my work talking about bittersweet or anxiety. So I will work with the 3D printer if have some error. So I use that error to as a concept in my work. If it has some error or collapse, I will working with it together, because I said like the little ball thing actually is inspiration from the thyroid nodules. Sometimes we get that kind of thing when you have negative emotion and like anxiety. So when it start to have error, I feel so anxious. So I start to add that little balls on my work while I have some problem with the work. So I mean, I feel like sometimes if it's not like totally collapsed, I mean like I will use that arrow as one of my concept of my work. Although I don't know whether actually I think it is kind of functional, because it provides another metaphor or another kind of concept in my work. Yeah.
I can address that because I had a whole summer of print failures. But yeah, basically a lot of times when you're printing, if you want to make the shape that you would normally hand build or wheel throw, it just wouldn't work. And so I probably printed like dozens of things that just completely fell apart. And after a while, I realized what was more interesting were the things that didn't completely flatten out like a pancake, but had sort of unravelings. And so as the printer was printing, you'd go with your hand and hold it up, or you'd have like a big chunk of clay to have supports. And you can also print a 3D print with supports in PLA and with clay printing, but then you waste the clay and you just spent like 2 hours loading a tube. So it's this interesting, it's like I was assisting the printer the whole time. Like that's how I felt about it. And when something would start unraveling, it would look kind of cool, but I would keep my hand there as it was like moving around to make sure the print would survive. And so it really became this strange collaboration, because I kind of wanted it to do all the work, but it didn't. And so I was just like, I was in there ribbing it, keeping it smooth. And at some point, some of the pieces, you know, I'd print half of something, it'd run out of clay. I didn't want to switch out the tubes, and so I ended up hand building on top of the piece. So half the piece would be 3D printed, and then another half would be hand built. And I made a series of work that was like that, and they looked the most interesting, I think, because they had this like organic but like computer robot quality, like all of that together. And so I liked that. It's like you want the failures because they look really human, and they kind of touch upon a human failure experience, but you don't want the whole thing to fall apart, which is like what we always struggle with 3D printing. So it just has to be like wrong enough.
Yeah, I think in terms of the development of like clay 3D printing technology, it's at a point where a lot of institutions are kind of buying commercially purchasable printers to have it in like a class setting. And it's at a point where once students know the basics of it, they just take it into their, I guess they adapt it back to their usual practice, where I see there's like emergence of like hand-built element coming back into it, or do some like crazy collaborative aspects to it, I guess, that I'm noticing, that maybe I guess I'm not sure where I'm trying to go with this, but I guess it's I'm noticing a phase where I see kind of folks' usual, because I guess like when I first started like learning, I felt like all the output within the class looked very similar, and now I'm seeing where folks are just taking it back to their own voices, and I guess like embracing moments of glitches and that like your unique like individual creative self is coming through. Long story short.
You've all touched upon this a bit in all of your answers and what you've been discussing, but and you talked about the failures and the emotion and all that, but I'm thinking about the labor that goes into the pieces, that is sort of the hidden labor, the labor behind the object, and whether that's important to be, if that's important to be displayed or like conveyed to the viewer. And I'm also thinking about like, of course there's even just being an artist, there's like immense amount of labor that is hidden or below the surface, just, taking images and editing and writing, your art statement and applying for things, of course, so much. But these objects themselves, there's a lot of labor that goes into, I've done some 3D printing, so I know like, and especially with clay for you, there's just a lot of time and energy that gets put into it that you don't see in the object. And I think a lot of people see these 3D printed objects and they're like, oh,
It's printed.
clay.
That's not true. No, it's not that.
And is that important to your work?
I think my answer will be the same as the identity question. It's like if someone really interested and want to like ask about like the process or how much time you use for ceramic, because we know like we need to bisque and we need to glaze it and we need to fire again. If anyone really interested in that, like as a ceramic artist, I really appreciate it. But I will not like, if someone just like, oh, it's cool, and then they just walk away, I think I'm fine with that. But I will be super appreciative if someone really want to engage with us or know about the stories or the process behind my work and everyone's work, yeah.
Yeah, I guess with ceramics, we all here know how much labor it is. So in a way, I don't necessarily need to talk about it except with my ceramics friends, and we like to complain about it. But specifically with the 3D printed labor, you have to model, you have to know how to do Rhino, you have to kind of understand what's visually coded in Grasshopper, that's a lot of labor. You have to be a software engineer to fully understand that stuff. And so in that way, there was so much labor involved, and then I was in this experimental residency where I got to test out all this amazing software, and then the grad students was also be modifying the software with specific features that I needed or I wanted, and so that was incredible too. I had these like computer geniuses who could like help me make anything, and there is this amazing amount of labor there and like resources and people pulling together that, whenever I tell people about this 3D printed residency that I did and how crazy it was, and I didn't know how to use anything, but they were like experimenting on me because they wanted to see how craft and digital technology would come together, and then they would write papers about it and submit and present their work, and maybe get great teaching positions after that. When I would talk about this process, people are like, you should really do a performance or some kind of book about this experience. And I'm like, I know, it's really wild. And then there's this hotbed of 3D printing in Santa Barbara with all these unusual people who do it. And so and then the whole thing with like scanning people and then trying to print them. It was just like such a wild experience for me, and not necessarily just like the labor, but the experience and like what it took to make the pieces, that I definitely want to explore that more in terms of like not just the pieces, but the whole experience as like a means of artistic production and digital fabrication, and what does that mean for art practices, and like who's trying to get into it and who's trying to manipulate it, and it's wild.
Yeah, I think sometimes when audiences look at the work, they don't see that sense of like compressed time that goes into making one work, and I'm happy to talk about it as long as I can when I have the opportunity to do so. But I guess. I guess I got to realize that like people might not know when just looking at the work, but if folks have like a little bit of experience with clay, then there's that moment of connection, because used to at least have that like material experience to know that like, oh, you can make something out of clay like that. And that's why I'm like, oh yes, you're part of the cult kind of situation. But I think something that I wanted to note was when you are printing with clay, there's so many underlying variables that gets added into consistency of clay, type of clay, firing, so on and so forth. That yeah, I want to delve into it more, but it was a lot of work. It was a lot of work.
Yeah, it's yeah, no, I think when I look at artwork, like I like to feel that it's effortless. I don't know, like the works I respond to the most. I mean, even though like logically I know how much work and labor goes into sort of like even just being an artist and like putting work out there in and of itself, I feel like is so difficult. And then like just the making of the work, just all of it, Jeff, like you were saying, is so labor intensive. Ceramics is labor intensive, just like the amount of time it takes even. But yeah, I don't know. I just like, I love when things look effortless. I don't know. It's not a very like great answer, I guess, but I just, I don't know. There's something really magical about all this labor becoming like a thing. Like, I don't know. I imagine like a seed growing or something. Like there's actually all this labor, even though we just sort of like look and like, oh, it's sprouted. But there's all these like internal mechanisms. So yeah, I guess it's good to like sort of recognize those mechanisms. But at the same time also be able to just sort of like wonder, like, because it's not like math where it's like 1 + 1 + 1 and it equals a number. It's sort of like there's something, yeah, there's like magic in there. So it's like labor, 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 and it's like, whoa, art. Or like, I don't know, or like sort of that transcendence you can get from looking or experiencing really, or making really cool, amazing art. Yeah.
You know, ceramics obviously has been around for thousands of years, and it's been created with humans working with the dirt, you know, and like making and learning and technologies in material and skills, cultures coming together, you know, politics, money, you know, thousands of years of that. And now you all are on this, you're all pioneers in like a spaceship, in like a brand new, totally new, wild, exploration world of working with machines to make objects, right? So this is kind of a fanciful question, but I'm wondering what your, you know, interpret it however you want, your hopes, dreams, fantasies about the next 10,000 years of humans working with machines and clay. Like what is that to you?
What?
You know, like what is that to you? Like I really see like we're at like this real inflection point of like, you know, humans have only been working with humans with this material. Now you're working with machines. And what does that mean for, I don't know, just for whatever you think about. Or your wildest dreams, like what would a machine be that could help you create what you want to create, or it's not invented yet, or I don't know. Like what's next?
I guess for me, like as someone who uses, again, the least amount of digital technology in this group, I guess I always think about like how things are so based in materiality and reality. I think, you know, I think about like cobalt, or like, you know, in ceramics, it's like, oh, there's no more custard, like, oh, spodumene is so expensive. Like all of these like different ingredients that are mined and found on this earth. Like I think a lot about just like those ties to, yeah, just to materiality and like just the physicality and the humanness of it. I think like the kind of idea with like digital technologies is you're sort of like escaping all that. Like things can be just become very, like again, like the cloud, or just, yeah, like you're no longer tied to physicality and reality and like I guess humans in a way. And I feel like that's just not true. And especially listening to you all talk about how difficult it is to like use the technology and how to grapple with the physicality of it, and like building the machines, making sure the machines are working properly, and like making sure the clay is like the right whatever. Yeah, it's just like we're all just like primordial goo still to a certain degree. I don't know.
I'm not sure yet, because I mean, like for art, I mean this year in Sika there's one panel they're talking about using AI in ceramics, but now it's kind of more like use, because they're more like generating 2D maybe it will give you more inspiration, or maybe yeah, they will generate some like based on your artwork style. They will give you more like inspiration, or they think what you might do. I think that is what the trend. Maybe AI can use in ceramics, but for the process, I still think it have a long way to go because the machine now still have so much problems, and then maybe later they have more. Machine can help us like to load the clay to do the cleaning by itself. I think that might be the next step. Then more people will want to use the machine. I don't know. And for industrial side, I mean, there is a lot of like different type of ceramic which like a material department they experiment with. I mean, that is already used to like a lot of machines, and that I think that might be the filter ceramic way to go. But for me, I want something help me to load the clay and clean all the thing. If we have that, I'm pretty sure we can engage. Yeah, we can wash the clay, or someone help us to throw, like use like do the wheel throwing. I mean, the round press already do that, but still like include a lot of labor. Maybe later, all of this can be all just like yeah, like automated, and like robots are doing that. If like that, I think ceramic art will be promote. Like, a lot of people will like to do that, right?
I agree. I want the future to be machines are cleaning my studio and like getting rid of all the dust that we're not supposed to inhale, and then printing perfect and imperfect forms based on what I want, helping us hold the pieces, giving us assistance. That's the future I'm interested in.
Or a fan that they know like which part it needs to be more like dry more quicker, and they will just go there and like dry it quicker, and go on the other side and dry it quicker to make sure.
There's like a moisture detector, and so it knows exactly which part of your sculpture it needs to dry, so it dries evenly and doesn't crack.
That's calculate based on the structure of your model.
On your model.
And know this part needs to be dry quickly because that part is somewhere
thinner,
structure.
Thinner or thicker.
Yeah, they can do thinner or thicker.
Yeah, we just want them to assist us. We don't need them to just make everything.
On the day Raina stopped by the studio, we talked about kind of, I guess like, what I would want is a wine cellar style humidity box that controls all the preloaded tubes. That's like ready to go for me. That's my 2 cents for the future.
Here in front of the Instagram, please.
Yes, DM me, please.
Play wish list.
Also, different printer use different kind of consistency of the clay. So it's kind of if we use another like machine like wasp, we need to use softer clay than 3D powder log. Then we need to learn everything from the beginning.
Okay, well, maybe we can reconvene once some of these technologies exist and discuss. But yeah, for now, thanks so much for being here. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.
It's a lot of fun. Thank you for the questions. Thank you to the panel. Thank you so much. And the show Calibration is on view in my gallery in Boston, 460C Harrison Avenue, through July 7th.